Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
In a controlled factory environment, you can build faster, you can build with less waste.
We will remove all the other cost structures that are being mandated by this NDP government.
BC's housing challenges. The Conservatives and NDP have some very different approaches to tackling it. Plus,
it's allowed us to identify what is a mushroom, be able to pick it with high accuracy.
From warnings about deep fakes to the future of farming, artificial intelligence is a big topic at a gathering in Kelowna. And
our culture, who we are, comes from Haida Gwaii, from the land.
We take you to Haida Gwaii as the Haida Nation reclaims stewardship of the land.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. With 22 days until the provincial election, the BC NDP and BC Conservatives have been talking housing on the campaign trail. And as Katie DeRosa explains, they have very different approaches to tackling our housing crisis.
Comox, we call it the Comox box, here in the Comox Valley, where these are very standard houses that were basically pre-approved by the municipalities.
As the NDP's campaign bus rolled through Courtenay, the city's mayor says his community is a good example of the kind of thinking needed to spur home construction.
People could just walk in and they knew pretty much what the cost was going to be, but because they were doing them on such a volume, it allowed them to be deployed much faster and much less expensive.
Speaking in nearby Cumberland, NDP leader David Eby touted a plan to use prefabricated homes, which can be built in as little as 12 weeks.
In a controlled factory environment, you can build faster, you can build with less waste. The homes that are built are more consistent and more efficient, and it's cheaper.
He also highlighted new provincial laws that allow multifamily units on single-family lots. BC Conservative leader John Rustad unveiled his housing plan in Surrey. He's pledging to fast-track development permits, introduce new tax incentives to spur rental buildings, and remove zero-emission targets, which he says puts an unnecessary burden on builders.
It's estimated that the costs have increased between 30% and 40% for middle-class housing under this NDP, with their hidden taxes associated with the step code and other components associated with this.
Rustad says he would scrap the NDP's multifamily housing law, which some mayors have said does not work for their communities. Rustad also says he would not force low-barrier supportive housing on any community, and he would shut down existing sites if residents are causing problems. The BC Green Party candidate for Courtenay Comox says neither the Conservatives nor NDP are doing enough to address the province's homelessness crisis.
All I've heard is involuntary care. That is the only solution that I've heard. And it is not a solution that is compassionate. It's not even a solution based on evidence.
Hamir says the Greens would increase the use of tiny homes for people living on the streets, like has already been done in Victoria and Duncan. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Cumberland.
And our election coverage will continue in just a few moments. We'll be speaking with Daybreak South host Chris Walker about key issues in the Southern Interior and Okanagan as part of our recurring host-to-host interview series. So stick around for that. With tools like ChatGPT now at your fingertips, artificial intelligence is becoming more part of everyday life. In Kelowna, leading minds gathered at the Level Up AI Summit to unveil the next frontier in this rapidly evolving field. Among them, BC entrepreneurs who are already riding the wave of AI innovation. More now from our Brady Strachan.
Well, now you can have an assistant that can actually do it for you.
Industry visionaries like Alessia and Kane Minkus took the stage at the AI Summit on Friday, offering the crowd a glimpse into the future of artificial intelligence.
The power of artificial intelligence today is creating a world where there are no boundaries due to languages.
Some of the technology on display, real-time multilingual communication, already transforming how people connect across the globe.
Le pouvoir de l'intelligence artificielle aujourd'hui, die Kraft der künstlichen Intelligenz schafft heute eine Welt.
Along with the breakthroughs, there were also warnings, like these disturbingly real deepfake videos of political leaders, to ethical concerns. Speakers cautioned against the potential dark side of AI. Closer to home, innovators in BC are finding real-world uses for AI. Tech entrepreneur Chris Payne shared how his team in Salmon Arm is using AI-powered robots to revolutionize commercial mushroom farming.
So it's allowed us to identify what is a mushroom, be able to pick it with high accuracy, trim it and test the quality of that before we pack it. And that's really important for reaching a quality standard that's important when you're shipping produce out to grocery stores that people are actually going to buy.
Beyond the tech demos, the summit was a peek into what the technology could bring just a few short years from now.
I'm really keen to see some of those physical world changes. Excited when, full automated self-driving is all around.
This means that, for example, the lead...
As ideas take root, event organizers are confident that AI will soon become a key part of everyday life in the Okanagan.
The possibilities to unleash your creativity, you're not hindered by the tools, right? And by, the technology. The technology will empower you as opposed to slow you down.
And he's already gearing up for next year's summit, eager to see where AI will take us next. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
About 13,000 people near Souk on Vancouver Island have been hit by a water main break. The Capital Regional District says their water quality is being affected, and it's asking residents to use less water until the break is repaired. Take a look at the areas that are impacted. We'll zoom in here. They include Souk, East Souk, parts of the Juan de Fuca electoral area, and Tusuk First Nation. The district says the repairs will take days, with the next 24 hours being critical. Officials say initial reports indicate a fallen tree caused the break in the main, but they won't know for sure what happened or how long a fix will take until the main is fully dug up. VCC Clark SkyTrain station has now reopened after it was shut down for several hours on Thursday because of an unstable crane very close by. Transit police say a crane with a large load attached to it, you can see it there, began to move. It was at a construction site on Keith Drive near Clark and East 6th Avenue. Millennium Line service resumed just before midnight, and nearby streets are open as well. The city says it's working with the contractor, WorkSafe BC, TransLink, and police to ensure the safety of the public as well as employees working in the area. The family of a missing Indigenous woman is still looking for answers 7 years after she disappeared. Christina Ward was 21 when she vanished in September 2017. Investigators say several tips have come in, but none have panned out so far. Her parents, though, say they have not given up finding her.
Christina was young and developing as a young lady, and she was fun, loving, and easy to snap out of if she's in a little bit of a bad mood.
She enjoyed being with us. Didn't matter where we went. She wanted to come, but unfortunately she just wanted to make friends somewhere, and how she left the house, we have no idea. Her last steps that she crossed down over, but then she came up here, dropped into First Slice, bought a bottle of water, and crossed the street and vanished.
We know she was last seen with the man on the bike. We've got kind of grainy pictures of that man. So we need somebody that was in this area that saw them together to come forward.
It's a stark reminder that every child matters. Christina matters. Our women, our children, our men matter, and that they're going missing at rates far higher than average Canadian communities.
The biggest struggle we have is awareness. Keep it out, the word out that Christina is somewhere out there and someone knows something. We need to bring her home. We need answers. We need closure.
Some emotional moments in an Ontario courtroom earlier in the day, where the defense continued its cross-examination of the woman accusing Jacob Hoggard of sexual assault. The musician's lawyer challenged the complainant's theory, and as Thomas Dagler reports, the details were explicit and sometimes disturbing.
This picture, shown to the jury at Jacob Hoggard's sexual assault trial, highlights how that fateful night began for this woman. With a Headley concert in northeastern Ontario, followed by an after-party. Then inside this motel, a sexual encounter that's at the center of the case. For the fourth straight day, the complainant, who can't be named, testified and broke down in tears, facing an often tense cross-examination by Hoggard's defense lawyer, Megan Savard. "You're asking the jury to believe an impossible story," Savard told the woman. "False," she replied. At trial earlier this week, the complainant testified she was raped, slapped, choked, and urinated on by the singer when she was 19. But Hoggard's lawyer shot back, accusing the woman of destroying evidence and fabricating key details. The complainant denied that once inside that motel room, Hoggard played songs on his guitar, which the defense described as romantic. They suggested she helped him take off her clothes, and that the woman secretly wanted a one-night stand with a famous musician. The reality, Savard told her, is you have no memory of the sex on the bed, and you're making it up as you go along. False, the complainant repeated.
It's going to be, the defense challenging the credibility and the reliability of the complainant. And then, of course, if the accused person chooses to testify, then the Crown is going to be challenging that person's credibility.
Hoggard's lawyer described the whole incident as a sleepover and questioned why his accuser never screamed for help if she was really in trouble.
The defense acknowledges a sexual encounter occurred, and the Crown is trying to prove it was not consensual. Hoggard has pleaded not guilty. The trial resumes next week. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Darius Madavi is away today, so Karis Hogg is here for our first look at the weather. We started wet this week, and what do we get now?
Yeah, and windy as well. A significant windstorm yesterday, and that, there were power outages today through much of the province still because of that. But we're heading towards a dry weekend for the most part. So the province will stay mostly dry, but then when we get to Monday here, you can see there's a lot of precipitation offshore, and that is going to come through the province and reach the south coast by Monday into Tuesday. So dry through the weekend, but then we're looking at a wet start to next week. Looking at tomorrow, some temperatures pretty nice across the province. Kelowna, mix of sun and cloud, and 20. Prince George, mix of sun and cloud, and 12. Chance of showers in Terrace with 12 degrees, 16 in Bella Coola. Victoria, mix of sun and cloud, and 16 degrees tomorrow. And taking a quick look now at Metro Vancouver for tonight into tomorrow. Dry, but a little bit cloudy, increasing cloud overnight, a low of 10 degrees. And then we'll start off tomorrow morning, mainly cloudy, but we will get sunnier as we move through the weekend, and I'll have more details later on the show.
Sounds good. Thanks, Karis. Well, Canadian soccer phenom Christine Sinclair, the pride of Burnaby and one of the founding players of the Portland Thorns in the National Women's Soccer League, has announced she is retiring from the game. Sinclair says she will finish her season with the Thorns. Last year, she retired from the Canadian national team, finishing her international career as the world's top goal scorer for both women and men with 190. Portland plans to honor her before the final regular season home game on November 1st. Still to come, the Current's Matt Galloway takes us to Haida Gwaii for a look at the importance and significance of this year's historic land agreement between the Haida Nation and the BC government. You'll want to see this. With a little over 3 weeks before Election Day here in BC, we're checking in with CBC hosts across our great big province to hear what issues are top of mind for voters in their areas, including the province's southern interior. And that's where we find Chris Walker, host of Daybreak South in Kelowna. Chris, appreciate you doing this. What are some of the major issues that are dominating Kelowna, the greater Okanagan, and your listener area?
Well, you know, they're pretty similar to issues in the rest of BC. This won't be a surprise. Housing and the cost of living, access to health care, the related issues of the opioid crisis and homelessness. There is an urban-rural divide that's growing even within this region, and that might make the issues a little different in Kelowna than in rural areas, and it changes the electoral politics, which we'll talk about in a moment. But so let's start with housing. Nothing new for people in the Lower Mainland, but what's happened, Dan, since the pandemic is that people have left the Lower Mainland looking for cheaper housing. They found it here, but the problem has hitched a ride, and the demand here has been very high for 4 or 5 years. You know, we talked to a family on our show. Their rent has doubled in 6 years. Their rent, of course, has doubled, but their income hasn't changed. Now, they live downtown. So like most people in cities, they're a little more liberal. They're looking for non-market solutions in this election, co-op housing, subsidized housing, things like that. You might find different ideas in the suburbs or in rural areas where people are more conservative. So they're looking for things like tax credits, more freedom for short-term rentals, maybe lower fees for construction, those sorts of things. Now, lately in Kelowna, the rent has been falling slightly. The vacancy rate's gone up a bit. The NDP could try to take some credit for that, but people I talk to are frustrated, and frustration tends to favor the opposition. So that's housing. On healthcare, I think this is where the Conservatives have a bigger advantage. My sense is that unlike housing, driven by market forces, people lay the responsibility for healthcare directly at the feet of government. And so there's quite a bit of support here for more private solutions. There are more people here with a higher net worth. More of them are older, some of them from Alberta. The Okanagan is a place of free enterprise, so things like socialized medicine, they're viewed already with some skepticism, right? And that increasingly appeals to a younger conservative crowd here too. Now that's interesting. It's interesting because that doesn't necessarily translate to the opioid crisis. There are some loud voices further on the right, maybe, but the people I talk to, including conservatives, sometimes especially conservatives, they want more intervention by government on that particular problem, more treatment, more recovery, more programs. And this is where I think independent candidates, former BC United candidates, might be able to pick up some votes. People who kind of lean to the right but don't like John Rustad's rhetoric on the drug crisis see this more as a healthcare issue and want bold but real centrist intervention.
You mentioned BC United. Let's dive into a bit of history here. The Kelowna area was once the BC Liberal stronghold. With United's implosion, what's the feeling for voters there now?
Well, a stronghold is an understatement. Remember when Christy Clark couldn't win in Point Grey, the party looked for the safest seat in the land. It was here. But Dan, that was then. This is now. It is a different time. All over the world, conservative politics have changed, right? And it's no different here. The old conservative tradition in this valley, like the loafer-wearing Chamber of Commerce, church-going types, that's giving way. In its place, a right wing that's more strident, influenced by American politics, influenced by social media, the anti-vaccine movement as well. And my sense is that they're pretty motivated to own the libs, as it were, to vote against any liberal cause. And if they can't right now vote against Trudeau, they're happy enough to vote against David Eby. And polls suggest that BC United's support is peeling off toward the Conservatives. Maybe not a surprise, but the Conservatives are poised to reap those rewards here.
Yeah. And lastly, we appreciate your time. Quite a few independents running. What are their chances in the Okanagan?
Well, if history is our guide, their chances are slim. There's about a 1% success rate for independent candidates in BC elections. There's only one BC United candidate that's an incumbent in the Southern Interior, now an independent, of course. So most of them were new anyway. They now find themselves without a party, without name recognition. So these are conservative ridings to lose. The hitch here could be vote splitting. There are urban ridings, Kelowna, Vernon especially, where there's enough NDP support that a split vote could lead to NDP wins. There's always an outside chance as well that well-known independents could do well, even win. I mentioned Tom Shapitka in the East Kootenay, some others to watch. Kevin Acton, popular mayor in the North Okanagan. Stephen Johnson on the west side of Kelowna. Christy Clark's old riding. So it's a short list, and Dan, it's a tall order.
Chris Walker, host of Daybreak South, we appreciate your time and your analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
Generations of Indigenous people have fought to protect the land and culture of Haida Gwaii. And this year, the Haida Nation has reclaimed stewardship of that land in an historic agreement with the province. The CBC's Matt Galloway went there to hear why the agreement is significant and what this means for the future of Haida Gwaii.
Anyone who has ever visited Haida Gwaii will tell you it is a very special place. 100 kilometers off the coast of British Columbia, north of Vancouver Island, Haida Gwaii is an archipelago with hundreds of islands and home to the Haida Nation. In April, the BC government signed an agreement that officially recognized the Haida title over Haida Gwaii. We're here on Haida Gwaii, and we're talking to people about what this means, about what it means for the land, but also for the people who are here.
The thing with Haida title is we've always known that this is our land.
2 generations of Haida, Jalin Edenshaw and his daughter Hannah, are leading us through an old-growth forest to see an ancient Haida artifact.
So see, we're starting to get into sort of monumental cedar area. Some nice big trees.
You good?
No problem here.
Everything okay?
So here's the canoe right here. You can see how it's got a little bit of a concave through here. You can see the stump there where it was cut. And then this is where it fell.
And this would be from how long ago?
If I had to guess, I'd say the 1860s, and that's when the smallpox hit.
And now, this unfinished canoe is a key to Haida land claims, evidence the Haida have brought to the courts to preserve these areas from logging.
You know, up until now, we've had to use our culture and things like this old canoe to protect these areas, and the argument being that we need these things to exist as a people. And it's true, right? Our culture, who we are, comes from Haida Gwaii, from the land. And so, you know, this is exactly who we are right here.
Jalin says Masset was like a canoe factory before European explorers arrived in the late 1700s. Settlers named the archipelago Queen Charlotte Islands and brought with them diseases that ravaged the Haida population, bringing it from an estimated 20,000 people down to under 600 Haida residents by the early 1900s.
And before that, we controlled it all. And it was only after our population declined that sort of Canada got a foothold. And then pretty much immediately we were fighting for the recognition again.
There's now a foundation of respect that we can operate on based on that recognition of title. We're no longer in conflict about that. It's a fact that we're all recognizing.
The Rising Tide Agreement between the Haida Nation and the provincial government outlines a framework for governing land on these islands. And it's a big deal because it's the first time a provincial government has acknowledged Aboriginal title outside of the courts.
And it means that we don't pass that conflict on to future generations, that the space is created to design a future, that they're part of designing their own future and their own life, how land will be managed, how society will work, and making decisions that are best for here, for the long term, and not based on interests in Victoria or Ottawa or away from Haida Gwaii.
I mean, it's easy to spoil a culture and a language and the land in 100 years, and that's what we're up against.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Gujo.
And a forest like that, the ocean and those things are what keep us as Haida people today.
So if they're logged off?
If they're logged off, we probably end up the same as everyone else, I guess.
Haida culture and land are intertwined, but without an acknowledgement of Aboriginal title, they've had to fight the Crown, the province, and big industry, a fight that's been going on for decades.
It was more than a month of confrontations like these, which finally gave the Haidas the ear of the BC government. They also brought the Indian Affairs Minister out of Ottawa, not to this logging road, but to Vancouver, to try to get a resolution to the dispute over the Haida's claim over the Queen Charlotte Islands.
The stand at Haida Gwaii or Lyle Island to protect Gwaii, that was a real flashpoint for the province, the country, the world to see the cause of recognition of Aboriginal title broadcasted into everybody's living rooms and in the newspapers.
I think that our people have expressed their desire to deal with these issues through negotiations over the past 100-odd years, and our people have been very patient.
Those issues include disputes over fisheries, offshore oil, land title, and protecting old-growth forests, and logging has been a particular flashpoint.
Ottawa offered more than $100 million to develop a national park and compensate loggers. The BC government wants almost twice that. 70 jobs are at stake if the national park goes through.
We need the logs, we need the jobs.
At the rate of logging today, old trees will be gone before new ones are ready.
It's not in our interest as resource workers to work ourselves out of a job. It doesn't make sense.
That was Dale Lohr back when he was involved in the logging industry. Now he takes people into the woods to marvel at the giant trees still standing.
In 1995, I'm building a road, and in there's a canoe. The engineers come in and they said, there's a new law in place called the BC Forest Practices Code. You're 1.7 million into this road. If we built this road and we can't log this, I'm dead. They had a discussion amongst themselves. They come in the next day with a self-loading logging truck with a winch on it, hook onto that artifact and get rid of it, right? We did this with dozens of canoes, dozens, right? Maybe even hundreds, where they just hauled them out. That was my big change. I went at the end of my shift, looked at the canoe, called up Guja and said, you need to come up here. Showed it to him. As soon as he knew it was there, they couldn't destroy it. But that was when I first realized my culture sucked. You know, over money, we were willing to completely destroy this.
The other families who live on this island that worked with us to protect land, the ones who aren't Haida, they've stood with us because as they're living here, they come to rely on the land and it starts to become more a part of them, and they feel some obligation to look after it.
What have you heard? What are people talking about when it comes to this agreement?
Aside from a couple of the rich logging companies that are local, haven't heard anything negative. I see a bigger difference in the Haida communities than in our communities. Our communities are just kind of looking at it going, well, I guess my land's going to get more valuable. According to the agreement that we wrote, people who are not Haida have a right to grow and prosper here inside municipal boundaries and on fee simple land. There's only 1.5% of the island that is that way. Therefore, if you're wanting to live here and you're not Haida, there's going to be a bigger and bigger demand on a finite supply.
Our people were able to, without that proper recognition of title, still protect Gwaii, protect the goose, and over time, you know, have been able to hold off different attempts to hurt the land or extract.
And in 2002, the Haida filed an Aboriginal title claim with the Supreme Court of Canada.
In a flourish of ceremony, the Haida filed suit seeking Aboriginal title over the Queen Charlotte Islands and the sea around them.
Yeah, I remember as a little kid, you know, watching Guj editing papers and changing Queen Charlotte Islands, crossing it out and writing Haida Gwaii. And then 10 or so years ago, we gave back the name Queen Charlotte to the government.
The name we're giving back is Queen Charlotte! Our real name,
You know, we won a lot of court cases, we won a lot of stands, we did a lot of things that led to this moment, but it, you know, wasn't automatic. It wasn't going to come freely. But in the end, you know, really there was not much other choice.
What do you mean there wasn't much other choice?
Well, they couldn't beat us. And so if you can't beat them, then fix it.
We've all witnessed history here today.
Haida leaders and government officials sign a groundbreaking land agreement called Rising Tide.
So in our long and ancient history here on Haida Gwaii, this chapter with British Columbia, which has been a dark chapter in many ways, it's really it's been damaging to the land and harmful in many ways, but it's really a short time. It's a very short part of our ancient history here with Haida Gwaii. And today we are creating a new story in our history here.
The Rising Tide Agreement includes a 2-year transition process with an initial focus on land and resource decision-making on Haida Gwaii. So the work continues, but with a new framework for the next generation to move through.
Hannah, do you want to come over here for a second?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Growing up, the way I sort of connected people like practicing our culture to a fight, things that should just be living were sort of resistance also. And I think I'm really excited for like my generation and future generations for like living our life according to our culture, for that not to be a fight, for that just to be like living.
As airstrikes decimate parts of southern Beirut, Israel's prime minister appeared before the United Nations to defend his country's tactics. The latest on the violence and the growing calls for a ceasefire are next. Israel's Prime Minister addressed the United Nations General Assembly today. Benjamin Netanyahu vigorously defended his country's military actions in Gaza and southern Lebanon. He also lashed out at Iran and the UN. More now from the CBC's Chris Reyes.
Netanyahu addressed the General Assembly for more than half an hour. In the audience, families of hostages still being held in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu promised to spare no effort in bringing those hostages home. That got a big applause. For those families, for his country's very existence, Netanyahu was defiant in justifying military operations in the region.
As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice, and Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Netanyahu saved his sharpest accusations for Iran, calling its aggression a curse on the Middle East, one he's determined to fight against at all costs.
I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran. If you strike us, we will strike you. There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach. And that's true of the entire Middle East.
Netanyahu called on the global community to fight against Iran and to realize the potential of peace in the Middle East. He did this as he launched into an angry tirade against the United Nations.
The singling out of the one and only Jewish state continues to be a moral stain on the United Nations. It has made this once respected institution contemptible in the eyes of decent people everywhere. But for the Palestinians, this UN House of Darkness is home court. They know that in this swamp of anti-Semitic bile, there's an automatic majority willing to demonize the Jewish state.
Netanyahu's speech comes one day after Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas called on the United Nations to host a peace summit to restart the two-state solution. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Israel, meanwhile, says it has carried out what it's calling a precise strike against Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon. It targeted the group's headquarters in a suburb of Beirut. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 2 people are dead and more than 70 hurt. The CBC's Margaret Evans has the latest.
The moment massive Israeli airstrikes hit the Lebanese capital, sending plumes of smoke up over Beirut's southern reaches. Smoke as thick as the fear on the ground that a full-scale war is now inevitable. It was the most powerful Israeli attack on Beirut in the conflict so far. Rescue workers arrived to search flattened buildings in the Dahya, the densely packed southern neighborhood known as a Hezbollah stronghold. An Israeli military spokesman soon appeared with a prepared statement calling the attack a precise strike on the Iran-backed militia.
Hezbollah's central headquarters was intentionally built under residential buildings in the heart of the Dahya in Beirut, as part of Hezbollah's strategy of using Lebanese people as human shields.
Unconfirmed reports that the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was the target have been swirling on social media. Tens of thousands of Lebanese have already been displaced by cross-border attacks, but the numbers have increased dramatically since Monday, when Israel escalated its air campaign. Many of the displaced have come to Beirut, housed in schools and public buildings. The world is in ruins, says Noha Jamal. There are people still under the rubble in her village, she says. Malak Mahmoud Saleh fled with her family on Monday after Israeli strikes destroyed her home. People are mentally drained now, she says. I'm taking medication to stay calm, but we will return back home victorious. She wants Hezbollah to keep fighting as long as Israel keeps fighting. My opinion is that if they stop, she says, we will stop. That seems far less likely on either side than ever before. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Beirut.
And tonight, the Foreign Affairs Minister has a message for the up to 45,000 Canadians, permanent residents, and their close family who are still in Lebanon.
Please leave now. I can't be more direct than this.
Melanie Joly says there are seats on commercial flights the government has reserved for those registered with Global Affairs Canada. There are also loans available for people who cannot afford to buy their tickets. Back at the UN in New York, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who addressed the General Assembly earlier this week, met with Donald Trump today. Trump has recently criticized Zelensky for not appeasing Moscow to reach a peace deal. Today, though, Trump touted their close relationship.
We have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have. Oh, I see. Yeah, but you know, it takes two to tango. You know.
The meeting comes after Zelensky received strong backing from Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris yesterday. Statistics Canada's GDP report today showed the economy growing more than expected in July, 0.2%. But StatsCan's early August estimate indicates that growth has flattened. It says that's because of weakness in manufacturing and transportation. It's reporting strong growth, though, in oil and gas and in the public sector. It all leaves analysts still expecting another interest rate cut late October. Before that comes StatsCan's next week of set of jobs numbers in 2 weeks. At least 40 people have been killed in the southwestern U.S. Category 4 Hurricane Helene continues its path of destruction. After the break, we look at the damage that storm is leaving behind.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond. Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
The Category 4 Hurricane Helene has left a swath of destruction across Florida and southwestern parts of the U.S., killing at least 40 people. As Katie Nicholson shows us, homes have been torn apart and rescue crews are on missions to save people from floodwaters.
This is the part of Florida's Big Bend that was hit the hardest last night when Hurricane Helene made landfall as a Category 4 storm with those 215-kilometer-an-hour winds. And you can see some of the destruction here, just structures peeled apart. And you see that as you drive through this region, trees are toppled everywhere. In this particular area, that storm surge was also an issue. You can see it's still fairly flooded here. I talked to a woman down the road. She had been here since 1969. She and her husband listened to the evacuation orders when they got back today. They saw that the floodwaters had smashed through the windows of her home, and it looks like the water level came up to about 6 feet. Just about everything in her home completely destroyed. We've also noticed here a lot of search and rescue choppers. That's because Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says that a lot of people didn't listen to those evacuation orders. They need to make sure everyone is safe and accounted for. We heard from Governor Kemp in Georgia that there were fatalities coming out of the flash floods that they also experienced today, sending crews out to try and rescue people, including a first responder who apparently also died. And as this storm, this monster storm, continues north, it has also created flooding conditions in North Carolina. There are fears of more landslides. There's already been one reported landslide in North Carolina. And that whole Appalachian mountain area that connects Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee, also an area of concern. This is a monster storm, and it is not done with the U.S. quite yet. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Steinhatchee, Florida.
Kara's Hog is back for now for our second look at the weather. Downright autumny, at least yesterday.
Yes, yes, we have had some very autumn vibes with the rain
It's almost
and
like
the
it's
wind.
fall. Like
It is
officially.
almost, yes. Although yesterday here in Vancouver, I felt like it was more like late autumn than early autumn. So I don't know.
Just because it was like
the rain
teeming with rain
well,
and
it
felt,
just felt extra cold.
Yeah, people wander around in turtlenecks.
Yes. And I didn't feel ready for that in September.
Oh, some of us are ready.
You're ready for turtleneck season. Bring it
Always.
on. I'll cozy it all up. Well, it has been pretty wet and windy this week, and actually, you know, first significant windstorm of autumn rolled in Thursday, and the power outages caused by that were still being felt today through a lot of the province, you know, Vancouver Island, through the central interior, also the Okanagan and the Kootenays. But we did dry out today. You can see satellite and radar over the past 6 hours. It was a pretty dry BC today, and it looks like we're going to have those conditions as we move into the weekend. So Saturday into Sunday, it's pretty dry, but then we get here Monday, midday Monday, and you can see Haida Gwaii and the north and central coast already feeling a lot of rain again, and that precipitation is going to move through the province and come down and get to the south coast by about Monday evening. So this is kind of the break. The weekend right now is the break in the between the wet spells anyway. So one little weather watch to tell you about, there is a wind warning for the South Peace River region around Dawson Creek. Wind gusts tonight up to 60 kilometers an hour, but that should die off by tomorrow morning. And a quick look at the 5-day Metro Vancouver forecast. A little cloudy start, but then looks like sun by Monday, rain by Monday night into Tuesday. Dan?
Okay, we'll take it. Thanks very much, Karis.
You're welcome.
Beloved Oscar-winning actress of the screen and stage, Maggie Smith, has died. We'll take a look at some of her most iconic roles right after this.
I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
CBC returns as the exclusive media partner of the 2024 Chutzpah Festival, November 1st to the 10th. The festival showcases international celebrations of dance, music, theater, comedy, and multimedia arts. For tickets, visit chutzpahfestival.com. And on November 2nd, support Cystic Fibrosis Canada with CBC guest host Gloria Makarenko at the annual 65 Roses Gala. For tickets, visit 65rosesgala.com.
She captivated audiences around the world on the stage and on the screen. Renowned actor Maggie Smith died early this morning. She was 89.
And as CBC's Sam Sampson reports, she's being remembered as someone whose career spanned genres and generations.
From casting spells to throwing shade.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Dame Maggie Smith stole every scene.
Do your duty to our school!
For younger audiences, Smith was best known as Professor Minerva McGonagall.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
In the Harry Potter films.
She brought a book with her that should keep her occupied.
And Violet Crawley, the spunky Dowager Countess of Grantham, a role that catapulted her to fame.
I led a perfectly normal life until Downton Abbey. Life was fine. Nobody knew who the hell I was.
But Smith's career spanned decades.
I am a teacher. I am a teacher first, last, always. Do you imagine that for one instant I will let that be taken from me without a fight?
She won 2 Oscars, including Best Actress for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. She was equally at home on stage. During 4 seasons at the Stratford Festival in Southern Ontario, Smith wowed audiences in dramatic roles, including Shakespearean characters like Lady Macbeth. A true actor's actor, she refused to quote the play outside the sacred walls of a theatre.
It was a line that I never, ever could learn. I should have looked it up, except that it's not a good thing to quote it, isn't it? It's just an impossible thing.
But we're not in the theatre, see.
I still wouldn't mess with it.
The dark spirits are out.
Stratford staff say they still share stories of Smith's talents and her impact.
Her ability to make verse come to life, help us understand the human situation in such a clear, in many ways unforgiving, but beautifully helpful way, is something that I think will endure. We love it. And therefore she made this festival stronger, and she also made us understand each other better. I do not do anything merely.
Her stage presence earned her a Tony Award in 1990, but the prestige did not end there. Smith received several honorary awards for her work in the arts, even from royalty. Queen Elizabeth II made Smith a dame in 1990.
Enjoying ourselves, are we?
A career of performances to be loved for years to come. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Edmonton.
Awesome.
She was just fantastic.
Loved it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
Janella Hamilton will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. So have a great weekend.